bringing you face-to-face with industry experts and seasoned professionals. We'll demystify the terminology, break down the intricacies, and equip you with the knowledge to make informed choices. We will leave no stone unturned as we guide you through the entire homeowning process. We'll address your burning questions, debunk common myths, and offer practical advice to empower you to make sound decisions. I am Amanda Hannon, broker-owner of Hannon Realty Group, and as your host, my hope is for this show to be your compass, your mentor, and your source of inspiration. Today, I would like to welcome Josh and Chris from Allan Paradise Home Staging. Thanks so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having us.
Absolutely. So could you tell our viewers a little bit about you and your company?
Sure. Josh and I have been in business for about 4 years now. We started doing home consultations back in 2019, and it's really blossomed ever since then. We've been doing consultations, we've been doing home staging, a little bit of interior design work, and since we started, we've tripled our warehouse space. We own all of our own inventory. We own a couple of trucks right now, so we can get home staging done as quickly as possible for clients.
Awesome. Great. Now, let's get down to basics. For people who don't know what home staging is, can you explain what that encompasses?
Absolutely. It's really, it's like getting your car ready to sell or getting your car ready to trade in. Mm-hmm. The better it looks, the more money you're going to get. So you got to clean, you got to take all the clutter out, do some rearranging and, create proper traffic flows, things like that.
Awesome. And how do you determine what changes need to be made in the home?
What usually happens is stagers walk the house with the client prior to making any changes, and we sit down and discuss what their needs and wants are, mm-hmm. their timeline for moving, and come up with an action plan room by room. Okay. It may require getting a storage unit or a box in the driveway where mm-hmm. they can put any extra items to remove them from the house to get the house ready for a showing.
Okay, awesome. And what's the typical timeline from start to finish as far as the staging process goes?
If we meet with the client, say on a Monday, we can, depending on our schedule, we can be out there by the end of the week and have the house staged for them.
Okay, great. And if you're doing, let's say, a whole house stage, is it a couple days or do you get it done in a day?
Usually it's a day.
Okay. All right, awesome.
Yeah, one day. For people that live in their homes while they're on the market, it really depends on what needs to be done at their home.
Right.
And everybody lives in their home. They don't have it set up to sell 365 days a year. So it doesn't matter who you are. You have to, do a little bit of work to get ready to go on the market. So it depends on what the scope of the job is for occupied stagings, how long what the timeline is.
Yep.
But vacant staging, we can,
Okay. And to that point, occupied staging, do you use the furniture that the homeowners have, or do you bring your own? Do you supplement?
A hybrid.
Okay.
All of the things that you just said.
Okay, perfect.
It's a mix of all of those things. So, sometimes the homeowner has really nice stuff, even if they have stuff that's old or outdated, if it matches the character of the property, mm-hmm. We wouldn't bring in brand new, designer on trend furniture and put it into a house that hasn't been updated since the 80s, because it's just not going to mesh. It's not going to give the buyer a good perception.
Right.
But we can usually, help them just declutter mm-hmm. and rearrange things.
Okay.
So that, it creates the proper focal point and gets the traffic moving in the right direction.
Right.
And it really just gives the illusion of more space.
Right.
Because that's really the goal.
Right, absolutely.
We've had the advantage of being able to see some of the properties that we've staged mm-hmm. after they've been purchased and after the people move in, and it's never even close to how we set it up.
Right.
You know, because they're setting it up to live in, and we're setting it up to sell.
Right,
So,
absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay. So how do you handle challenging home staging situations like limited space or unusual layouts, things like that?
We have a very creative design staff that works for us, and they've walked the properties and worked with the homeowners as far as small spaces, awkward spaces. We may turn a space into like a little reading nook or a small bedroom into a nursery or an office, things like that. And we really try to play up the character of the room, maybe romance it a little bit, so that when a potential homeowner walks in and they see what could be an awkward little nook, instead of seeing it as a negative, they'll see the positive, where it's a quiet little place for them to escape.
Right.
Or a little room for the kids to keep all their toys out of the living room. And we try to play up the assets that way.
Awesome. Now, can you discuss any trends or changes in the home staging industry that homeowners should be aware of? I mean, one that comes to my mind is like the virtual staging versus actual staging. Can you speak on that?
Yeah. So, you know, when COVID was here and you know, things were changing, people weren't going into the houses as much. There were a lot of virtual showings, so virtual staging became really, really popular because the images look great, and to the average eye, you know, most people can't tell that it's virtually staged. I can tell when a property is virtually staged because I know what to look for. Basically, if the lamps don't have cords, it's virtually staged.
Yeah.
So virtual staging does a really great job of getting traffic to your property for your showings and your open houses. But when buyers arrive, they feel very uninspired by the fact that the home is empty, or you know, it's occupied, and you know, whoever took the photos and did the virtual staging just changed what was there. So people kind of feel duped.
Yep.
You know, but definitely uninspired. You know, they're walking into the property thinking, oh, you know, I could do this over here. You know, based on the images, they're thinking, oh, I could do this over here, and da 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 da. You know, and then when they get there, it's just empty and it's vacant. It's like touring a vacant property.
Right. And I find a lot of times too, people can't visualize, you know, they can see the pictures and it looks great when they're online, but then when they get into this open space without seeing the furniture actually there, placed there, things can look smaller, they can look bigger.
We were just talking to somebody that we work with frequently about a home.
Yep.
That when we walked in, the house was empty, and we all felt the house was too small.
Yeah.
And once we placed all the furniture in the house actually felt bigger and cozier at the same time.
Right.
It was a real, almost like a tricking the eye, where we couldn't imagine. The living room was very tiny, for example, and we couldn't picture more than just a small sofa and a chair. And we just placed things correctly. We were able to add a small dining table, and it really brought the house alive.
Right.
So that's something with staging, where you can just see a blank room and not get an idea of how you're going to live in the room.
Right.
With the furniture in the room, it actually it's kind of a funny story. Whenever we stage a house, we walk in, set the furniture up, and by the time we're done staging, we actually fall in love with the property almost every time, because it just really tugs at your heartstrings and really gives you that strong emotional connection to the property. And that's really the whole point of staging.
Absolutely.
To really get the buyer and the house to form a connection.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Now, how much does home staging typically cost? I know some people think, oh, home staging, it's totally out of my budget, but that's not really the reality.
Absolutely. You know, before we started our business, I thought that home staging was too expensive. You know, I assumed.
Right.
You know, I never had reached out to anybody or, you know, tried to figure it out. The first house that we staged was for my old boss, who I worked for about 12 years. He was selling his house, and it was it was on the market vacant for 4 months. And he had gotten, you know, several quotes from different staging companies, and he just wasn't ready to pull the trigger. And I was like, hey, you know, I'm starting a home staging company. And we quoted him, and we were pretty level with where they were at. You know, it was, how big was that house? Like,
It was about 3,000 square feet.
3,000 square feet. So something like that's probably, you know, in the range of like 3,500, give or take. Like, it depends on the features of the property too.
Right.
You know, if it's a 3,000 square foot house in North Smithfield, the furniture and the level of quality of the furniture that we put in a house that's in North Smithfield is going to be different than what it is if it's on the water,
Right.
in Narragansett or Newport or something like that.
Right.
You know,
And then that investment, what the return on investment that you're seeing. So it's not just you're throwing that money away.
absolutely.
You know, you're making that plus.
Absolutely. So there's really a psychology behind home staging, and it's, you know, when people can walk in and see themselves writing their story in your home, they feel connected to it, and they want it, and they have to have the home.
Right.
You know, and that's what will get you into, you know, multiple offers, multiple over asking offers, escalations, and things like that, where somebody just they've been looking forever, they're exhausted, and they walk in and they see this house and they love it, and they're not going to let it go.
Right.
You know, and you have, when you stage, you have more situations like that.
Right.
You know, staging, you know, gives the appearance of a well-maintained home, gives the illusion of more space. You know, and it minimizes, you know, like small flaws in the property
Right.
that, you know, maybe wouldn't be seen if your own furniture was in there.
Right.
You know, not anything that you'd have to disclose or anything like that, but, you know, it just appears more well maintained. So the other thing with staging is people who feel emotionally connected to it are more willing to accept like things that need to be updated, or you know, accept a property that doesn't check off all their boxes.
Right.
You know, many things.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you so much for joining us.
Absolutely.
Stand by and you will see some before and after pictures of some of the work that they've done. And when we come back, we will be with Christine Crum of Gentry Moving. Welcome back. I'm here with Christine Crum, owner of Gentry Moving and Storage. Welcome. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Amanda.
So tell a little bit about yourself, your company, how long you've been in the business.
So I am the owner of Gentry Moving and Storage. We are a local and long distance moving company here in Rhode Island. We've been in business 19 years now, located in Cranston, Rhode Island. We service Rhode Island, Mass, and Connecticut daily as kind of like our tri-state everyday area that we service. But we also have a few other offshoots of the company. We have a part of the business that's called Seniors on the Move, where we specifically help seniors that are moving out of their homes and moving into like their kind of like their retirement home, whether it be a smaller home, a condo, or even a senior living community. We also have storage, so if a client needs storage, we have a 25,000 square foot storage facility where we can hold people's belongings, whether it's for one evening, if they need a holdover between us moving them out and their actual closing day, all the way up to as long as they could possibly need us to hold it.
Okay.
We do long distance moving, which means we can take you from Maine to Florida, and we go about half mid-country, so about as far as, let's say, from Chicago to mid-Texas. Okay. And then last but not least, there's another part of my business we have. It's Gentry Moving and Installation, where we can go in and we can install office desks, furnitures, petitions to office spaces, or even to banks or universities. That's more of my commercial part of my business.
Awesome. Great.
Yeah, thanks.
So, because there's so many different types of moving services that you provide, there's, of course, different types of moving estimates. So, what should people know about different estimates? Like, obviously, you're moving from one town to the next versus one state from the next.
So when a client calls and it's a let's say a household move, right? Like you said, one town to the next.
Yep.
Usually my move managers will ask them a series of questions. Of course, where are you currently residing? Where is the new address? And then most importantly, how big is the house? And that's going to help us determine how many or how much belongings they're actually going to be taking with them. So on a local move, it's more of how much you're taking. Distance isn't as big of as a factor. So we will work with the client, walk through each room in their home, asking them what it is they're taking and compiling a list. From that list, we can then find out basically the poundage, like how much it weighs, and that determines what size or how many trucks they need and how many men they need to move them.
Okay.
If the house is 3 bedrooms or more, or a larger square footage, we will then give that to our estimator, and the estimator will come to the family's home. It's a free estimate, and he will walk through the home with the homeowners, basically going through everything from closets to attic to basement to storage, let's say their garage, or if they've got a shed, and then he compiles an estimate. So if we're doing it over the phone with you, if it's a smaller home or it's a smaller apartment, that's an hourly rate. And if it's a larger home or you have quite a bit more belongings, it's usually best for us to give an estimate. That way it's a flat fee and the client knows exactly what they're getting into for pricing.
Okay.
And that's normally done with a larger home, 3 bedrooms or more.
Okay, perfect. So in that case, there's probably not many unexpected additions in cost when you have somebody come out to actually do an estimate. But how can a homeowner avoid unexpected additions to the moving cost?
So it's a great question. If we speak about the estimate process, when you do an estimate with Gentry Moving and Storage, once the estimate is completed and both parties agree, that estimate is binding. So that is going to be the price the day of your move.
Okay.
There is a caveat, though, of course. If at any point the homeowner changes their list of what's going to the home, it can go up in price. For example, there's oftentimes we go to someone's home and they'll walk through and they'll say, well, we are going to sell the entire dining room. We're not planning on taking this. And that grand piano is going to my granddaughter.
Yeah.
And then we give an estimate based on what they're telling us is and is not going to go. And oftentimes this will happen either right before the move transpires, hopefully not on that day, but it can happen that way as well. Client will call and say, my granddaughter didn't want the baby grand piano, or we ended up deciding to keep the dining room set.
Yeah.
So that is going to, at that point, it will change the pricing of the quote
Right.
slightly because it was not anticipated as being in the move. So on our part, once you have a binding quote with us, we, Gentry, will not increase it on our end, but it can change if the client does change the scope of work.
Okay.
When you do an hourly estimate, or that's not an estimate, when you do an hourly quote, it's just we can give a generalization of amount of hours, but it's open-ended.
Okay.
So the way that works is it's an hourly amount with a certain number of movers, and there is a minimum. So it's an amount, and then there's a 4-hour minimum.
Yep.
So essentially, the client knows that we're in an understanding that we're coming at a certain hourly price for this block of time.
Right.
If it goes beyond that block of time, they are charged by the hour only for what is used.
Okay.
So for some homeowners, that works out well too. If a homeowner is on a budget, oftentimes they will say to us, I just want you to move the larger items that we can't handle on our own. Or they'll say, we just want you for 4 hours. Whatever you get done in the 4 hours is all that we are looking to do.
Okay.
So as far as hidden costs go, on our end, we're extraordinarily clear about what it is we're coming to do, what it is it should or should not cost. And there's always when we do finalize that, the client does need to sign a contract that binds us knowing what the kind of, I guess, the rules of engagement are.
Yeah.
Where this is what we're offering for this price. If there's any change on your part, it will shift.
Okay.
So
Now, how about long distance moves? So if there's any unexpected things, because obviously you don't see the house that you're moving their things into when you get down to Florida or South Carolina, North Carolina. Are there any sometimes unexpected costs involved in that?
So interestingly enough, that kind of works in the same manner.
Okay.
So when we are moving clients out of state, that is also, and that is always an estimate. That's not done blindly. That's done very, very upfront and clearly.
Yep.
So again, my estimator, Mike, would go to the client's current home and would walk through and do the same thing. But the difference with a long distance quote is the way it's quoted. So when you are taking belongings state to state, it goes by distance.
Okay.
And it goes by how much, the poundage as well. And then other things are also figured in. Like we know that when we pass through New York, there's a certain amount of tolls that have to be added in. So the pricing it's done in a similar sense, but there's more pieces to the puzzle for this to work out.
Right.
Oftentimes, client is aware of the home that they're buying, so they can show us, if needed, what the destination home looks like. Although, believe it or not, the destination home really isn't much of an issue. It's more, what are the belongings that you're taking?
Okay.
So a snafu of sorts, usually you don't run into anything terribly crazy unless the day that we show up, again, the client added more and it doesn't fit on the truck.
Right.
So if and when that does happen, we'll say to the client, we'll still take the belongings that were anticipated and that do fit. This overspill, either they find an alternate way for it to get to the next destination, or because we're going back and forth up the eastern seaboard, most commonly, we'll sometimes can say to them, listen, we can take it on the next trip if they're open to that.
Okay, that makes sense. So there shouldn't be too many surprises for homeowners or movers.
I mean, realistically, you hear horror stories,
Yeah.
which I know that those horror stories often make people very, very nervous and when engaging with a mover. I think mostly though, if you're working with a reputable company,
Yeah.
which every person should do their due diligence to
Right.
make sure, and you've got, for instance, especially with long distance, you've got that signed quote. It protects us legally, but it also protects you legally.
Right.
So if anything crazy comes up, we're going to work with the client to make sure that it gets fixed and to everyone's liking.
Awesome, great. So how far in advance should someone book a moving company?
So the rule of thumb is, if you can, giving a good month ahead is usually excellent. In the winter months, you can get away with sometimes definitely 3 weeks, sometimes even 2, because we tend to be slower
Okay.
between, let's say, December and May.
Okay.
But once you come into the summer months, the sooner you can call us, the better.
Okay.
What we find is, as we all know, most people are oftentimes looking to move those 3 days prior to the first of the month and those 3 days after. So
Yeah.
there's about, give or take, 7 to 10 days of every month, very end, very beginning, where we're extraordinarily busy.
Right.
And if a client needs a date in that window of time, the sooner they call, the better.
Okay.
But in what we find with residential moves is oftentimes their date is driven by their closing.
Right.
So closing realistically can be any date.
Right.
And oftentimes we find, and it can be a little frustrating on our end, but we absolutely will make do, is oftentimes, as you know, as a realtor, sometimes you use that closing date as a guide, but it doesn't always, well, you'd like to get to the closing
Right.
table on that particular day, so for everybody, including us.
Yeah.
But sometimes that doesn't work out.
Right.
So they usually call us with the date that they're desiring, and we're able to get them in. But again, a good month in advance is amazing if they can give us that. But,
Perfect.
But I have to tell you, we also can do last minute moves. You'd be surprised. There are days when, because someone found out 2 days prior
Yeah.
that their closing was moving. Now all of a sudden that little opening pops up. So we oftentimes do get the phone call, my goodness gracious, I need a mover. We didn't realize how much we had until we started trying to do it
Yeah.
ourselves. The move's in 4 days. Can you fit us in? Very often we can.
Okay, awesome, great. And then just to wrap up, can you provide any tips for packing and preparing the belongings for a move to ensure they arrive in good condition? Because I'm assuming that the homeowner would have to pack their things and then the movers would just come and move them.
So it can be done 2 different ways.
Okay.
We do offer what's called a full pack for clients that are not interested in packing their own belongings for time constraints or whatever the case may be, that they're not able to do it. You can hire us to do that as well.
Okay.
Or another option, which I find is it's a busy, 2 partners, they're busy, they can't get the house packed. Oftentimes people will say, can you just pack my dining room? Can you just pack my kitchen? Everything else we can handle ourselves. So when it's a client packing, oftentimes we'll say to them, a couple of different things. You don't want to overpack your boxes. You don't want them, A, to be too heavy for the movers, but we also don't want to pick the box up and poof, it opens up.
Right.
And you also, I know a lot of people will go scouring for free boxes, but believe it or not, box quality very much differs as to where you get your boxes from. So you want to make sure if you're using cardboard boxes, you're using a good quality cardboard box. You want to make sure they're taped very well, again, so nothing falls out. When you're boxing up anything that is glass or fragile, a lot of times people don't realize there's an art to wrapping those things. So you want to make sure that plates, glasses, anything of that sort is wrapped very well in some kind of, let's say, a newspaper.
Okay.
And then sometimes even bubble wrapped in between. I tell people all the time, personally, my opinion is if you were to be taking anything of glass or that's fragile in that way, I personally skip the cardboard box altogether.
Okay.
And I would say go buy the heavy plastic totes. It gives more stability to the actual, the tote itself.
Right.
As the men are packing things in the truck and loading them on top of each other, you want to make sure that it can be stable.
Okay, perfect.
Clothes can go in something called a wardrobe box. So
Yep.
you literally can just reach in your closet on those hangers and pop them right in the box. And most importantly, you just want to make sure that you list on the box what's in it, a brief description, so
Yep.
you know where it's going. And then when you go to open them, you know this is a kitchen box that goes in the kitchen. And last but not least, number your boxes.
Okay.
So if you know that there's 50 boxes in the load, 1 through 50, you've got them marked. So as they come off the truck, when you get home, you know that 1 through 10 is kitchen, and et cetera, et cetera.
Awesome.
So you can keep track of what you have.
Great. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Christine.
Thank you,
I
Amanda.
hope that this show has empowered you with knowledge and provided you with the tools to navigate the ever-evolving landscape of property ownership and investment. Whether you're a first-time homebuyer taking your first steps, an investor seeking new opportunities, or simply someone who has gained a deeper appreciation for the power of real estate, go out there and make your mark. If you would like to rewatch this episode, have any questions for our guests, or if you have any suggestions for future episodes, please visit our website at www.homewithamanda. I'll see you next time. Thanks so much.